Let's start with a scenario that should make every business leader uncomfortable. You're at an industry event. You get talking to someone who runs a business similar to yours. Similar size, similar market, similar challenges. You've always considered yourselves roughly equivalent. Same league, different team. Then they mention, almost in passing, that they rolled out an AI framework 6 months ago. Their team is fully trained. They've got approved tools, clear data rules, a simple policy document that fits on one page. And since they did it, output is up, turnaround times are down, and they've started pitching for work they wouldn't have touched before because they can now deliver it faster and cheaper than anyone else in the market. You smile, you nod, and on the drive home you're thinking, how far behind am I? The answer for most businesses right now is further than they'd like to admit. Here's what's actually happening across industries. A wave of forward-thinking businesses, not the giants, not the tech companies, but businesses just like yours, have made a quiet decision. They've decided that AI isn't going away, so they're going to organize it. They've stopped reacting and started leading. They've looked at what their teams are already doing, built a simple framework around it, and turned something chaotic into something strategic. And the results are real. Their teams move faster because they know exactly what's allowed. They innovate more boldly because they know what's safe. They catch problems earlier because there's structure in place. They win pitches because they can deliver at a speed and price point that unstructured competitors simply can't match. They're not slowed down by policy, they're enabled by it, and that distinction is everything. Meanwhile, businesses without that structure are facing a different reality. Their best people are leaving for companies that give them access to modern tools and trust them to use them. Their average performers are wasting hours reinventing wheels because there's no shared way of working. Their most confident people are making calls that nobody has sanctioned because there's nothing telling them otherwise. And leadership is stuck in a cycle of either ignoring the problem or reacting to it after something goes wrong. Neither of which is a strategy. The competitive gap this creates isn't just about speed, it's about capability, it's about confidence, and it's about compounding advantage. Every month that a structured competitor operates with a clear AI framework, they get a little better at it. Their team gets more skilled, their processes get more refined, their output improves. And every month you operate without one, the gap between you widens. Now here's the part that trips most leaders up. When they hear the word policy, they think restriction. They think bureaucracy. They think of all the times a policy made something slower, harder, more frustrating. They think we're agile, we move fast, we don't need more rules. But that's not what a good AI policy is. Not even close. A good AI policy is a permission structure. It's not a document that says you can't do this. It's a document that says here's how we do this. Here's what's approved. Here's what's off limits. Here's how we handle data. Here's who makes which calls, and within those boundaries, go. Move fast. Be brilliant. You don't need to ask permission because the permission is already built in. Think about what that actually means for your team. Right now, without a policy, every person who uses AI is making individual judgment calls about what's acceptable. Some of those calls are good, some are not. And the variation creates risk. A policy eliminates that variation. It gives everyone the same rule book. And paradoxically, having clear rules makes people more willing to use AI, not less. Because they know they're doing it right. They're not worried about getting in trouble for using a tool they found on the internet. They're not second-guessing whether this particular use case crosses a line. They know, picture this, you're in the boardroom. Your CFO is presenting a major acquisition opportunity. The numbers look solid, the analysis is thorough, the deck is polished, everyone around the table is leaning in. This could be the deal that defines the next 5 years. You're excited, the board is excited, you give it the green light. 3 weeks later, you discover the financial model underpinning the entire decision was built using AI-generated data that nobody verified. The market projections were plausible sounding, but fundamentally flawed. The competitive analysis referenced companies that don't exist in the form described. The revenue assumptions were based on industry averages that were 3 years out of date. You've already committed, Legal has already been instructed, and now you're staring at a decision that could cost you millions, built on a foundation that nobody actually checked. That's not a cautionary tale from a business school case study. That's happening in boardrooms right now. And here's the thing that makes it so dangerous. Nobody in that process was trying to cut corners. Your CFO trusted the analyst. The analyst trusted the tool. The tool produced something that looked exactly right. Professional formatting, confident language, specific numbers. AI doesn't hedge the way a junior analyst might. It doesn't say, "I'm not sure about this," or "you might want to double-check that figure." It presents its output with the same authority whether it's completely accurate or completely fabricated. And we've been conditioned to trust things that look authoritative. That's the trap. Here's how it actually plays out in practice. Someone is under pressure. The deadline is tight. The ask is big and the time is short. They turn to an AI tool to speed things up. Draft some analysis, crunch some numbers, pull together some market context. It works, it's fast, the output looks great. They present it, nobody asks where it came from because it sounds right, because it looks professional, because there are 100 other things on everyone's plate, and nobody has time to interrogate every data point. But AI doesn't always tell you when it's guessing, and it guesses a lot. Let's look at some specific scenarios. A sales team uses AI to forecast next quarter's revenue. The tool pulls in general market trends and produces a confident projection. Nobody validates the underlying assumptions against your actual pipeline data. The forecast goes to the board. Budget decisions are made based on it. The quarter comes in 30% below projection. A product manager uses AI to analyze competitor strategy. The AI describes competitor products, pricing, and positioning. Some of it accurate, some of it hallucinated, none of it sourced. The product roadmap shifts based on a competitive picture that was partially invented. A finance team uses AI to model tax implications of a new structure. The model misses a jurisdiction-specific requirement that a human specialist would have caught immediately. The structure goes ahead. The tax bill arrives later. Each one of these feels like a small risk in the moment. Together, they're a pattern that can quietly undermine your entire operation. And it's not just about big strategic decisions. The risk compounds at every level. A junior team member uses AI to summarize a client meeting and sends the summary to the client with inaccuracies in it. A proposal goes out with AI-generated statistics that turn out to be wrong, and your client's team spots it before you do. A manager uses AI to assess a candidate's suitability based on their CV, and the AI introduces bias you didn't sanction and didn't know about. Small moments, real consequences. So what's actually at stake when you add it all up? First, money. Bad decisions compound. One wrong forecast leads to a wrong budget. A wrong budget leads to wrong hiring. Wrong hiring leads to wrong execution. By the time you trace the root cause, the original AI error is buried under 6 months of downstream decisions, all built on a flawed foundation. Second, let's start with a scenario that should make every business leader uncomfortable. You're at an industry event. You get talking to someone who runs a business similar to yours. Similar size, similar market, similar challenges. You've always considered yourselves roughly equivalent. Same league, different team. Then they mention, almost in passing, that they rolled out an AI framework 6 months ago. Their team is fully trained. They've got approved tools, clear data rules, a simple policy document that fits on one page. And since they did it, output is up, turnaround times are down, and they've started pitching for work they wouldn't have touched before because they can now deliver it faster and cheaper than anyone else in the market. You smile, you nod, and on the drive home, you're thinking, how far behind am I? The answer, for most businesses right now, is further than they'd like to admit. Here's what's actually happening across industries. A wave of forward-thinking businesses, not the giants, not the tech companies, but businesses just like yours, have made a quiet decision. They've decided that AI isn't going away, so they're going to organize it. They've stopped reacting and started leading. They've looked at what their teams are already doing, built a simple framework around it, and turned something chaotic into something strategic. And the results are real. Their teams move faster because they know exactly what's allowed. They innovate more boldly because they know what's safe. They catch problems earlier because there's structure in place. They win pitches because they can deliver at a speed and price point that unstructured competitors simply can't match. They're not slowed down by policy, they're enabled by it. And that distinction is everything. Meanwhile, businesses without that structure are facing a different reality. Their best people are leaving for companies that give them access to modern tools and trust them to use them. Their average performers are wasting hours reinventing wheels because there's no shared way of working. Their most confident people are making calls that nobody has sanctioned because there's nothing telling them otherwise. And leadership is stuck in a cycle of either ignoring the problem or reacting to it after something goes wrong, neither of which is a strategy. The competitive gap this creates isn't just about speed, it's about capability, it's about confidence, and it's about compounding advantage. Every month that a structured competitor operates with a clear AI framework, they get a little better at it. Their team gets more skilled, their processes get more refined, their output improves. And every month you operate without one, the gap between you widens. Now here's the part that trips most leaders up. When they hear the word policy, they think restriction. They think bureaucracy. They think of all the times a policy made something slower, harder, more frustrating. They think, we're agile, we move fast, we don't need more rules. But that's not what a good AI policy is, not even close. A good AI policy is a permission structure. It's not a document that says you can't do this. It's a document that says, here's how we do this. Here's what's approved. Here's what's off limits. Here's how we handle data. Here's who makes which calls. And within those boundaries, go. Move fast. Be brilliant. You don't need to ask permission because the permission is already built in. Think about what that actually means for your team. Right now, without a policy, every person who uses AI is making individual judgment calls about what's acceptable. Some of those calls are good, some are not, and the variation creates risk. A policy eliminates that variation. It gives everyone the same rule book. And paradoxically, having clear rules makes people more willing to use AI, not less, because they know they're doing it right. They're not worried about getting in trouble for using a tool they found on the internet. They're not second-guessing whether this particular use case crosses a line. They know, let's be honest about something. Most leaders who've listened this far have had the same thought at some point. This all sounds important, this all sounds urgent, but where do I actually start? The problem feels big, the unknowns feel overwhelming, and the instinct, understandably, is to either dive into researching AI tools for weeks before doing anything, or to hand it to someone else and hope they sort it out. Neither of those works. Here's what does. You start with 5 questions. That's it. 5 simple, direct questions asked to your team. And what comes back will give you more clarity about what's actually happening in your business than any consultant's report, any technology audit, or any board-level strategy session, because it comes straight from the people doing the work, unfiltered, real, and almost certainly surprising. Before we get to the questions, let's talk about why this matters so much. You cannot manage what you cannot see. That sounds obvious, but the implications are significant. Right now, you're making decisions about AI, or more likely, not making decisions about AI, based on assumptions. You're assuming you'd know if something major was happening. You're assuming your team would flag it if there was a problem. You're assuming the risk is probably manageable. But assumptions aren't data. And in the absence of data, you're not managing risk. You're just hoping. The audit changes that. It replaces assumption with reality. And reality, even when it's uncomfortable, is always better than assumption, because you can act on reality. You can't act on a guess. So how do you do it? The mechanics are straightforward. You send a short, anonymous survey to your team. Anonymous is important. People will tell you the truth if they know there are no consequences for honesty, if they think this is a trap. A way of finding out who's been using tools they shouldn't. You'll get sanitized answers that tell you nothing useful. Make it clear from the outset, this is about understanding how we work, not catching anyone out. We want to know what's actually happening so we can support you better. Keep the survey short. 5 questions. No more. People are busy. A long survey gets abandoned halfway through. 5 questions gets completed, and 5 questions, it turns out, is all you need. Here are the 5 questions. 1. What AI tools do you currently use in your work? List as many as you like. This is your inventory. You'll find tools you've heard of, tools you haven't, and probably a few that will make you raise an eyebrow. That's fine. You're not here to judge, you're here to understand. 2. What do you use them for? This is where it gets interesting. You'll find that different people are using AI for completely different things. Some are using it for writing and communication, some for analysis and research, some for coding or technical work, some for planning and organization. The use cases will be broader and more varied than you expect, and some of them will be genuinely impressive. 3. How often are you using AI tools? Daily, weekly, occasionally? This tells you how embedded AI already is in your operation. The answer for most businesses is more often than leadership assumed. Significantly more often. 4. Have you ever had any concerns about using AI tools at work around data, accuracy, or anything else? This is the question that surfaces the risks. And here's something important. Your team often already knows where the problems are. They've felt uncomfortable pasting certain information into a tool. They've noticed an AI output that didn't seem right. They've wondered whether what they're doing is okay. They just haven't had a forum to raise it. This question gives them that forum. And 5, what would help you use AI more effectively and confidently in your role? This is the question that turns the audit from a risk exercise into an empowerment exercise. It signals that the point of all this isn't to restrict, it's to improve. And the answers will tell you exactly what your team needs. Clearer. Let's start with the tension that every leader feels at this point in the journey. You've done the audit, you know what's happening, and you're sitting with two competing instincts that pull in opposite directions. On one side, you can see the opportunity. Your team is already using AI. Some of it is genuinely impressive. The productivity gains are real. The capability uplift is tangible. You want more of that. You want your team firing on all cylinders, using every tool available to them, moving faster and smarter than your competition. On the other side, you can see the risk, the data that's been going into platforms you didn't sanction, the decisions that were made on unverified outputs, the compliance exposure you didn't know you had until you started asking questions. You want that stopped, or at least managed. Here's the good news. Both instincts are right, and they're not in conflict. The goal isn't to choose between capability and control. The goal is to build a framework that delivers both. A structure that says to your team, here's how we use AI, here's what's safe, here's what's off limits, now go and be brilliant within those boundaries. That framework has 4 layers, and each layer is simpler than you might expect. Layer 1 is approved tools. Right now, your team is probably using a mix of whatever they found on the internet, whatever their colleagues recommended, whatever came up first in a Google search, and whatever happened to be free at the time. That's not a strategy, that's luck. And luck runs out. The first thing you do is take control of the tool set. You evaluate the AI tools that are already being used. You know what they are now because you asked, and you decide which ones are sanctioned and which aren't. You're not looking for the best AI tool in the world. You're looking for the right tools for your business. Tools that have appropriate data handling policies. Tools that offer the security controls you need. Tools that your team actually uses and finds valuable. Tools that fit your budget. For most businesses, the approved list ends up being 2 or 3 tools, maybe 4. That's fine. You don't need 10. You need the right ones, clearly sanctioned, consistently used. When everyone is working with the same tools, you get consistency of output, consistency of risk profile, and the ability to actually train your team effectively. You can't train people on 15 different platforms. You can train them on 3. Communicate the approved list clearly. Here's what we use, here's why, here's how to access it, and here's what's no longer sanctioned and why. Most people will be relieved. They've wanted guidance. They've wanted to know they're using the right things. Give them that clarity. Layer 2 is data rules. This is the single highest impact thing you can do to reduce risk in your AI operation. And it's also the simplest. You establish one clear, memorable rule about data. The rule is this: if you wouldn't be comfortable seeing this information appear publicly, it doesn't go into an AI tool. That's it. That's the rule. No complex taxonomy of data types, no lengthy classification system. One test that anyone can apply in 3 seconds before they paste something into a prompt. Under that rule, client names and personal details don't go in. Financial projections and confidential strategy don't go in. Sensitive HR matters don't go in. Anything that would be damaging if it appeared outside your organization doesn't go in. What does go in? General research, publicly available information, internal drafts that contain no sensitive data, anonymized examples, hypothetical scenarios, the creative, analytical, structural work that AI is genuinely brilliant at. All of that can happen freely within those boundaries. You communicate this rule to your team not as a restriction but as a protection. This rule exists to protect the business, to protect your clients, and to protect you. If you follow it, you can use AI freely and confidently. If you don't, you're taking on personal risk as well as busy gain. Let's get something out of the way immediately. When most people hear the word compliance, something happens to their brain. A kind of mental fog descends, eyes glaze, attention drifts. It sounds like something for lawyers and regulators and people who wear lanyards at conferences. It sounds like someone else's problem. It sounds, frankly, boring. But here's the thing about compliance. It's only boring until it isn't. It's only someone else's problem until it's yours. And when it becomes yours, when the regulator calls, when the client finds out, when the breach makes the news, it stops being boring very quickly. It becomes the most urgent, most expensive, most reputation-destroying problem your business has ever faced. So let's talk about it. Not in a dry technical way, not in a way that requires a law degree to follow, but in a way that makes clear exactly what's at stake, where your real exposure is, and what you need to do about it. Because the compliance trap around AI is real. It's growing, and most businesses are already in it without knowing. Here's the core problem. When your team uses AI tools with business data, they're not just using software. They're transferring information to third-party platforms, often hosted in different countries, often with terms of service that permit that data to be used in ways you haven't consented to on behalf of your clients. Often without any formal data processing agreement between your business and the AI provider. And in most industries, in most jurisdictions, that alone is a compliance issue. Let's make that concrete, because abstract risk is easy to dismiss. Specific scenarios are harder to ignore. Scenario 1. You run a professional services business. A team member is drafting a report for a client. They paste the client's financial data into an AI tool to help structure the analysis. That data, real client financials, identifiable and confidential, has now been processed by a third-party platform. Depending on your jurisdiction and your contractual obligations to that client, you may have just breached your data handling commitments. The client didn't consent to their data being processed this way. You didn't disclose it. And if they find out, through a subject access request, through a data breach notification, through a disgruntled former employee, the consequences range from a damaged relationship to a formal complaint to significant legal liability. Scenario 2. You operate in a regulated sector: financial services, healthcare, legal, education. Your sector has specific rules about how data is handled, how decisions are made, and how processes are documented. An employee uses AI to assist with a regulated activity, assessing a client's suitability for a product, summarizing a patient's history, evaluating a legal risk. The AI assists, the employee acts, but the process isn't documented in a way that meets regulatory requirements. When the regulator reviews your files, and regulators do review files, the gap is visible. The question becomes, was this decision made properly? And the answer, on paper, is unclear. That ambiguity alone can trigger an investigation. Scenario 3. A data breach occurs. Not through your main systems. Those are well protected. But through an AI platform one of your team members has been using. Data that went into that platform is now exposed. You have to notify affected individuals. You have to notify the relevant authority. You have to explain what happened. And when you explain that the breach occurred through an unsanctioned AI tool that a team member was using without any formal policy or oversight, the story does not reflect well on your governance. the fine isn't just for the breach. It's for the lack of controls that allowed it to happen. These scenarios aren't theoretical. Versions of all three are happening right now, across industries, in businesses that had no idea they were exposed. And the common thread in every case is the same. AI was being used without a governance framework. And when something went wrong, let's talk about the gap between knowing and doing. Because here's what happens with a lot of business content. You listen, you learn, you find yourself nodding along, thinking, yes, that makes sense, I should do that. And then the podcast ends, or the chapter closes, and life rushes back in. The emails, the meetings, the calls, the 100 things that were already competing for your attention before you started listening to this. And the thing you were going to do, the important, strategic, genuinely valuable thing, gets pushed, not abandoned, just pushed, until it's been pushed so many times that it quietly stops being a priority at all. That's not a criticism. That's just how organizations work. Urgency crowds out importance. The day-to-day drowns out the strategic. And the things that would make the biggest difference over the next 12 months rarely feel as pressing as the thing sitting in your inbox right now. So this episode is designed to do one thing: close that gap between knowing what needs to happen and actually making it happen, between good intentions and executed strategy, between where your business is right now and where it could be in 90 days. Because 90 days is the window, not a year, not a quarter-long planning cycle, not a transformation program with a steering committee and a project manager and a Gantt chart that nobody looks at after week 3. 90 days of focused, intentional work. That's all it takes to go from where most businesses are right now, AI everywhere, no structure, no visibility, no confidence, to a position of genuine control and genuine competitive advantage. Let's map it out. Days 1 to 30, the visibility month. Everything starts here, because you cannot build a strategy on guesswork. And right now, guesswork is all most businesses have. This month is about replacing assumption with reality. In week 1, you run the audit from episode 4. The 5-question survey goes out, anonymous, simple, clear about its purpose. By the end of the week, you have responses. You know what tools your team is using. You know what they're using them for. You know how often. You know where they have concerns. And you know what they need to use AI more confidently and effectively. In week 2, you have the conversations. 5 or 6 people across different parts of the business, 30 minutes each. You're not interrogating, you're listening. You want the stories behind the survey data, the specific moments, the workarounds, the things that work brilliantly that nobody has talked about, the things that don't work that everyone knows about but nobody has flagged. By the end of week 2, you have a complete picture, not a theoretical picture based on what you think is happening, a real one based on what is. In week 3, you make the decisions that the picture demands. Which tools are you approving? Look at what your team is already using. Evaluate them against a simple criteria: data handling, security, cost, usefulness, and build your approved list. For most businesses, this is a half-day exercise. You're not starting from scratch. You're making deliberate choices about what's already there. In week 4, you draft your policy. Not a 50-page document, 1 page, possibly 2. Approved tools, data rules, decision tiers, verification requirements, who's responsible for what. Clear enough that anyone in your business can read it, understand it, and know what it means for them. If it takes more than 2 pages to say what you need to say, you're overcomplicating it. Simplicity is the point. A policy that people understand is infinitely more valuable than a policy that's technically comprehensive but practically ignored. By the end of month 1, you have 3 things: a clear picture of what's actually happening in your business, a list of approved tools, and a 1-page policy. That's your foundation. Everything else is built on it. Days 31 to 60, the structure month. You have the foundation. Now you build on it. Week 5 is about communication. You share what you found in. Let's take a moment, not to rush to the next thing, not to jump straight into action points and takeaways and what happens next. Just a moment to step back and look at how far we've actually come in this series. Because sometimes, in the relentless forward momentum of running a business, we don't pause long enough to recognize what we've actually built. And what we've built here is worth recognizing. We started this series with a single, uncomfortable truth. AI is already in your business. Right now. Today. Your teams are using tools you haven't approved, making decisions you haven't verified, handling data in ways you haven't sanctioned, and you have no idea the full extent of it. That was episode 1. And for many of the leaders listening to this, that episode landed like a cold shower. The recognition of a gap you knew existed but hadn't fully faced. The uncomfortable realization that something significant was happening inside your organization, and you weren't in control of it. But we didn't stop there. We didn't leave you with the problem and walk away. Episode 2 showed you what happens when that lack of control collides with a high-stakes decision. The financial model nobody verified. The analysis that sounded right because AI always sounds right. The millions that disappeared because a powerful tool was trusted where it should have been checked. Not because anyone was careless, because there was no framework telling them when to check and when to trust. We gave you that framework. 3 tiers: green, amber, red. Simple enough to remember, powerful enough to prevent the mistakes that cost businesses their reputation and their money. Episode 3 showed you the competitive reality. The businesses that are already ahead. Not because they have more resources or smarter people, but because they made a decision you hadn't made yet. They organized their AI use. They built the permission structure that lets their teams move fast within boundaries. They turned something chaotic into something strategic, and in doing so, they created a gap between themselves and their competitors that widens every month. We showed you that gap, and we showed you how to close it. Faster than they did, because you're learning from what they figured out. Episode 4 gave you the tool that makes everything else possible. 5 questions, 1 week, and you go from flying blind to having a complete, accurate, reality-based picture of what's actually happening in your business. Not what you think is happening, not what you hope is happening. What is actually happening? That clarity is the foundation on which everything else is built. You cannot manage what you cannot see. Now you can see it. Episode 5 gave you the framework. 4 layers that work together to deliver something most businesses haven't achieved. Genuine AI capability combined with genuine control. Approved tools that create consistency and reduce risk. Data rules that protect your clients, your business, and your people with a single memorable test. Decision rights that give your team clarity on when to move freely and when to pause and verify. And training that transforms not just what your team can do, but how confidently they can do it. The 4 layers together create something greater than the sum of their parts. They create a culture. And culture, once established, is self-sustaining. Episode 6 took on the topic that most business content avoids because it's seen as too dry, too technical, too far from the day-to-day reality of running a business. Compliance. We didn't give you a legal textbook. We gave you clarity. We showed you where the real exposure is, in the data your teams are feeding into unvetted platforms, in the regulated activities being influenced by AI without adequate documentation, in the liability that sits with you when something goes wrong and there's no framework to point to. And we showed you that compliance, done proportionately, isn't a constraint on your ambitions. It's the foundation that makes those ambitions sustainable. Episode 7 turned everything W.